Right, you're welcome back. Now, they say the way a nation treats her prisoners says a lot about, that country.
Exactly. And there's no two ways about it.
Absolutely.
Oh, there are no
now,
two
the
ways
more
about
than 65,000 prison inmates in Nigeria's prisons may go hungry if the 7.5 billion naira debt allegedly said to be owed prison food contractors is not paid.
Now, that's according to a non-governmental organization, Alliance for Good Governance and Democracy. Now, the feeding and gas allowance for each inmate was increased from 200 naira to 450 naira in January 2015.
The NGO says the contractors have not been paid in the last 2 years and they're heavily indebted to financial institutions. Well, with us in the studio is a social commentator, Achike Chude. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Morning. Right.
How depressing is this particular report from Alliance for Good Governance and Democracy saying that prison contractors, food contractors are being owed this kind of money, 7.5 billion in over 2 years?
Yeah, well, in your opener, I just needed to maybe make a little bit of clarification. In your opener, you said that prisoners may go hungry if the debts owed the food contractors are not paid. And I would agree with you, but I would also tell you that they've always been hungry.
Long before this?
Long before this. I mean, when you look at prisoners right from time, you want to ask yourself whether they are being fed. So maybe what might happen this time is that they might generally, starve to death. But in terms of
in fact,
hunger,
it's the issue of starvation.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, the reality is that the state of our prisons, have always been deplorable, and there's so many people have been talking about it: NGOs, international organizations, local NGOs, and the rest. And if not, and again, we must praise the humanity of a lot of Nigerians, organizations, churches, NGOs and the rest have been doing wonderfully well over the years. A lot of people will not realize what these organizations are doing unless you work closely with them. For instance, I'm aware that the Justice Development and Peace Center, just one of them, JDPC, last year freed over 1,200 inmates. Some are waiting trial, some have fines, that they are not able to pay, bail conditions that they were not able to meet, and so on. So some of these organizations take up this responsibility to pay them. And but again, like you have said, the issue of money is being owed contractors, I think it's a very serious danger, I mean, for the country, the security of the country. Of course, at the best of times, prisoners, whenever they have, the opportunity to break out from prisons, they do. When they have a bigger motivation, which is
like
survival
hunger,
this time, like hunger,
is the strongest
the
motivation.
tendency for unruliness and instability within the prison system is exceedingly very high. And of course, if you have this kind of unstable situation in our prisons, and some of them break out of prisons, the government will have little sympathy from the citizens, because the essence of sending somebody to prison is not just for the sake of punishment, punitive measures, but it's also about reintegrating them.
Oh, well, that's a totally different,
and bringing them back.
That's a totally different thing.
You understand? So
we'll definitely get to that particular one.
It's a horrible situation that the government, it's a pity that has gotten to this level. We've not actually, for the past how many years, had, in spite of the socio-economic problems we've been having in the country, had something of this magnitude that they are not, their feeding is being threatened.
If we look at the budgetary allocation every year, the Ministry of Internal Affairs get a fair deal, not necessarily the highest, but it gets the fair deal. And allocations are meant for all of these things, because the Ministry of the prisons are under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, as the case may be. So if there are budgetary allocations for this, and no one is really asking questions, how should we handle it?
70-something billion?
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a good observation. I mean, the reality is that, that is the essence of budget, the budget proposal estimation. These are the things we're going to do this year. This is where, then it is the responsibility of the government to also determine where they're going to get these monies from. And then it's sent to the National Assembly, and then they go in there, defend, their budgets, and their budgets are approved. I'm not aware, and we have not been made aware that there has been any significant shortfall in the allocation, to the prisons in the country that will be responsible for this. So on the basis of, not having that excuse from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, we would assume that money was appropriated.
All right, let's look at the figures now. From 200 naira to 450. Do you think 450 naira a day really for food will do anything for any human being, even prisoners, as much as the rest of society may hate them?
No, I think it's a scandal. I think it's a scandal. It does not in any way reflect the socio-economic realities that we are facing in the country. We are Nigerians. We go to the market. We have an idea, especially with the inflationary trend in the country. We have a very fair idea that that money is grossly inadequate, And again, anything short of 1,000 naira is that is for subsistence, living. You understand? It's a scandal. And but also do not forget the fact that even those outside of the prison are also finding it exceedingly very difficult. And I wouldn't want to throw stones, but the reality is that some years ago, when we were regaled with what was going on, for instance, with the police and how they were being ill-treated, the kind of food recruits were being made to eat and watery and all of that, then you now ask yourself, what of those who do not have voices, within the walls of our prisons? Who is going to speak for them? So the 450 naira simply tells you that those in government are completely impervious to the socioeconomic situation that we're facing in this country.
I wonder how much you know about what is going on within, in Nigerian prisons. I recall, was it early last year, the Internal Affairs Minister, Dambazao, actually, visited some of the prisons, and he promised that he was going to change the narrative from what has always been, before he stepped in as Minister of Interior. I wonder what, do you have any information as to, whatever changes may have been introduced into the prisons, including food?
It is said that talk is cheap. He might have the very best of intentions, but the ability to walk the talk has always been the problem, especially in the country. And so, over the years, people have been talking about the deplorable conditions of our prisons, from overpopulation to awaiting, trial, inmates. And I think that is even one aspect that undermines the fundamental rights of citizens. A lot of these people that are awaiting trial. In fact, you have about 70% of people within our prisons are awaiting trial. Some are there for as much as 15 years, even if they are convicted for the crimes that they were alleged to have, committed.
They should have finished serving their terms.
They should have finished. Some of them maybe would have a maximum fine of, imprisonment of about 3 years, 4 years. He spends 15 years and so on. And then the society keeps quiet. That is the greatest injustice you can do to anybody. So you have this issue of people who do not have any business being there in the very first place, people who cannot pay fines as basic as 5,000 naira. I'm telling you, because I told you that JDPC has facilitated the release of over 1,200 and other organizations across the country. No, just in Lagos. Lagos Adas alone. You understand? Not across. And of course, again, the issue of healthcare, because that is the major implication of an overpopulated prison. The health, of these prisoners or inmates, are compromised. And so you have on average about 900 deaths in our prisons every year. That is outrageous, and then so many other things that are happening there that should not. So it also brings to question the criminal justice system, in Nigeria from the moment,
All right, you mentioned earlier on as to the number of churches, organizations, NGO, mosques that go to the prisons, donating bags of rice, bags of beans, all sort of food items and all of that. But sometimes still, this food doesn't even get to the inmates that they are meant for in the first place. Now, what kind of system, or maybe would you say there is corruption within the system, the prison system?
We all know, and that is what the country is trying to battle. We all know that there is endemic corruption in the country. we all know that virtually every sector of the Nigerian political economy has been compromised by corruption. So you cannot, remove the prison system, the criminal justice system from what is going on in the country. So definitely there's some level of corruption. When some of these items are given to prisons, they are not given directly to the prisoners. They are given to prison authorities. So what happens between the time they collect these items and when they are given to the prisoners, nobody knows. So for all you know, maybe a fraction of what is given to them ends up with the prisoners. And
or maybe more than a fraction.
Because I remember that about maybe 3-4 years ago, I was at the Koi prison with, I think, Dr. Tunji Braithwaite then. I also did this prison visitation and the late Tunji Braithwaite, and then also distributed items, and then I also did this prison visitation and the late Tunji Braithwaite, and then also distributed items and the rest. So this is idea, but you just give it to the prison officials. They are happy, they collect it, and they thank you, and so on, and then you go. But then again, I must say that it's just like in Nigeria, for instance. I mean, we know that a generator is supposed to be a backup for energy. You understand? But again, so I don't want to believe that food items that are sent to prisons by well-disposed Nigerians are what they rely on. Rather, they should be backup or supplements for what the federal government is doing.
Looking at the implications of government not paying these food contractors, the same Alliance for Good Governance has actually praised the contractors for their patriotism, saying they've continued to provide some kind of quantity of food for the prisoners. But of course, it's coming at a cost. They took loans from banks and they've defaulted. Some of them are actually facing litigation.
No, we are also told that some of them have had to go the extra yard of even selling some of their properties, houses, and the rest to be able to meet up with their obligations and their duties to the prison services, and that itself is lamentable. And I think that the government is responsible for that. So if some of them run into huge debt where they have to lose properties and all of that, and then they are facing litigation, I believe that if each case is taken on its merit and it is proven that it is as a result of the dereliction of responsibility by the government, then the federal government should step in to see how they can, abate whatever consequences they are facing as a result of the negligence by the federal government.
Yeah, but I wonder, certainly it is good to be patriotic, but when you have a duty, there's a contract between you and the government. Pay this money and I'm supposed to render this kind of service, and then there's a shortfall or not non-compliance to the agreement where monies are not paid to you. I wonder why the alarm is being raised just now and it wasn't even on from the beginning.
No, you see, one thing I can tell you, again, this is my country and I know my country. And one thing I can tell you is that these things do not start overnight. I can tell you, I can assure you, I've not been there, but I know how it goes, that these communications between them and the prison authorities and the federal government would have been ongoing for a very long period of time until it gets to the boil, where they now begin to go public with what is going on. I think they have gotten to a point of no return, where they just have to look for extra, extraordinary measures, more or less, to bring their situation to the public, so that Nigerians who are scandalized by what is going on will begin to put pressure on the federal government to make do on their promise.
Crying out. Is this Alliance for for Good Governance and Democracy that's crying out on behalf of the prison contractors? Now, the Controller General of the prisons, in Jafaro Ahmed, he's recommending a farm-to-feed kind of strategy where farmers or prisoners actually, can be in farm settlements, farm the food and feed yourself. And wouldn't this be a good solution, multi-pronged solution for that matter, even beyond the prisons? Nigeria is in
I will address that. Well, let me just say quickly that the NGO that brought up the Alliance for, I think, for Good Governance and Democracy, for Good Governance and so on, is, let's just say that they are speaking the minds of the contractors. So for all you know, they've been in discussion with the contractors and they need to bring it. So for fear that the contractors perhaps could be delisted from their business, that is there. But again, I think I don't know why this idea you just talked about has not been implemented all this while. All this while, because again, the prisoners, there's nothing wrong with them generating the food that they eat. Seriously. It's also about especially at this particular point in time where you're talking about divesting, where you're talking about the dangers of continuing to have a mono economy that is dependent on oil. And so one would have expected all this while that they would be contributing significantly, you know, to generate the kind of food that they should be eating, should be consuming. I do not think there's anything wrong with that. It's also a form of, maybe if I will use it that way, a form of exercise in the process, provided that they are very, very well fed.
And learning some skills.
Yeah, and learning some skills.
Take up
you know, and that was why I told
that
the essence of, you know, sending somebody to prison is not just to punish, but to reform the person, to rehabilitate the person.
Should prisons continue to be in the exclusive list?
No, I do not exactly think so. I do not exactly think so. I think that states, you know, should begin to take up some of these responsibilities. But again, these are states that are not paying salaries. Again,
so bringing the extra responsibility you know, of the prisons.
These are some of the implications.
All right, Achike Chude, thank you very much for coming on the program.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.